December 20th, 1944. 0530 hours. Ardennes Forest. Private First Class Marcus Sullivan pressed his eye against a rifle scope that shouldn't exist. Through the modified optics, 23 German soldiers materialized from absolute darkness, moving in practiced silence through snow that should have concealed them, each man a glowing shape against the frozen landscape, visible, vulnerable, completely unaware they were being watched. The device trembled slightly in Marcus's hands, not from cold, though the temperature had dropped to 7 degrees below zero. Not from fear, though discovery meant a firing squad. It trembled because 3 weeks ago, Staff Sergeant Reynolds had found Marcus assembling it in a foxhole, had held the crude apparatus up to lamplight, had spoken 7 words that still echoed in Marcus's memory. "If I catch you with this again, you're done." Done meant court-martial. Court-martial meant execution for sabotaging government equipment during wartime. The regulations were explicit. The penalty was final. Marcus had built it anyway. Now, through phosphorescent-painted lenses salvaged from German wreckage, he watched enemy soldiers advance toward Baker Company's position. 217 American soldiers sleeping in foxholes, exhausted, ammunition low, unaware that death was closing to within 200 yards. The Germans carried flamethrowers. Marcus's finger rested on the trigger. His breath formed crystals in the air. Every regulation he'd ever learned said, "Do not engage, hold fire, wait for daylight, conserve ammunition." Every instinct he'd developed hunting white-tailed deer in Minnesota darkness said, "If you can see them and they can't see you, you take the shot." The choice was simple: obey orders and watch 217 men burn alive in their sleep, or break every rule and prove that sometimes the forbidden thing is the necessary thing. Marcus adjusted the scope, the impossible scope, the scope that would make German patrols vanish from the Ardennes forest like ghosts who'd never existed. But to understand how a 21-year-old farm boy came to possess technology that baffled military engineers, you have to go back 13 years, to a place where winter meant survival and darkness meant opportunity. Clearwater, Minnesota. Population 462. The kind of town where you either worked in the mines, left for the city, or learned to hunt. Marcus Sullivan's family couldn't afford the first option, couldn't imagine the second, so hunting wasn't recreation, it was mathematics. His father, William Sullivan Sr., had returned from the trenches of World War I with lungs scarred by mustard gas and a mind haunted by what he'd seen in no man's land. He couldn't work underground anymore. The confined spaces triggered something doctors couldn't name and couldn't fix. So the Sullivan family ate what Marcus shot. By age 13, Marcus had developed a party trick that made neighbors uncomfortable. He could track a deer through darkness so complete most men couldn't see their own hands. Not by sound alone, not by luck, by reading snow. Body heat melts snow in patterns. A deer bed shows as a shallow depression with radiating melt lines. Fresh tracks hold warmth that lingers in sub-zero cold. Even after the animal has passed, heat signatures persist. Marcus learned to see them. On winter mornings, when the sun wouldn't rise above the ridge until 9 a.m., Marcus would be in the forest at 5. Temperature 30 below, darkness absolute. He'd place his bare hand on snow where he suspected a deer had passed. If the snow felt different, slightly less cold, fractionally softer, the deer had been there within the hour. His father watched this skill develop with something between pride and sadness. One morning, after Marcus returned with a 12-point buck shot in near-total darkness, William Sr. sat him down at the kitchen table. "You've got a gift, son, reading what others can't see." Marcus shrugged. "Just paying attention?" "No." His father's voice carried weight. "Paying attention is noticing things. What you do is understanding things. There's a difference." He paused, drew breath that wheezed through damaged lungs. "War's coming. You feel it same as I do. When it comes, the army's going to want men like you, men who can see in the dark. But you need to understand something about the military. Marcus waited. They hate men who think different. They call it innovation. They call it initiative. But what they really want is obedience. I saved 11 men in my platoon by disobeying a direct order.
You know what they gave me?
The Distinguished Service Cross. After the court-martial hearing, after 3 weeks in the stockade, after my company commander spent 2 days convincing a colonel that I wasn't a coward or a traitor. His father's eyes held decades of bitterness. The citation called it courage. The truth is they almost shot me for doing what needed to be done. Remember that. Sometimes the right thing and the regulation thing aren't the same thing, and the army will make you choose. 4 years later, December 7th, 1941, Japanese bombs fell on Pearl Harbor. Marcus enlisted the next morning. His father didn't try to stop him, just handed him a worn notebook. Keep notes. Document everything. If they ever try to claim you did something wrong, you'll have proof of your thinking. Marcus carried that notebook through basic training, through sniper school, through Normandy. By September 1944, it contained 13 entries. 13 confirmed kills. 13 men who'd never see home again because Marcus Sullivan had learned to read darkness in a Minnesota forest. The notebook also contained something else: frustration. The M1903A4 Springfield rifle was an excellent weapon. The Unertel scope attached to it was precision engineering. Together, they could put a bullet through a man's heart at 400 yards in perfect conditions. But the Ardennes forest in December 1944 offered nothing perfect. Fog rolled through valleys every afternoon. Snow fell in curtains that reduced visibility to 50 feet. By 5 p.m., darkness settled over the forest like a burial shroud. And the Germans knew it. They'd learned that American snipers couldn't operate effectively after dark. So they moved at night, probed defenses, repositioned machine guns, brought up ammunition. Sometimes they attacked. The American response was simple: hunker down after sunset, post sentries, hope they heard the enemy before the enemy heard them. Wait for dawn. It wasn't working. November losses in Marcus's sector: 42 men killed in nighttime engagements, 67 wounded. Most never saw what hit them. Staff Sergeant Reynolds held company briefings every 3 days. Effective immediately, all sniper operations cease at 1700 hours. Return to company positions. No exceptions. We can't risk giving away positions with blind fire. Marcus raised his hand. Sergeant, what if we modified the scopes? No. Reynolds didn't let him finish. The equipment is issued for a reason. It's been tested, certified. We don't tinker with it. Understood? Yes, Sergeant. But Marcus didn't understand. In Minnesota, if your rifle scope fogged up, you fixed it. If the trigger froze, you modified it. If the stock cracked, you reinforced it. Tools were meant to solve problems. When they stopped solving problems, you changed the tools. The Army didn't think that way. The Army believed that millions of dollars in research and development had produced optimal equipment, that individual modifications introduced unpredictable variables, that standardization saved lives. Marcus believed that 42 dead men suggested the standard approach had limitations. On November 23, 1944, he began sketching designs. The concept was simple. Human bodies generate heat. Even in sub-zero temperatures, that heat creates thermal variance. Snow amplifies it. If he could detect that variance in darkness, he could see what everyone else missed. He needed 3 things. First, a phosphorescent material that glowed when activated by minimal light, something that could gather ambient radiation and convert it to visible wavelength. Second, a light source to activate the phosphorescent material, preferably something that wouldn't give away his position. Third, a way to mount both components to his rifle scope without destroying the weapon's zero. Finding those components in a combat zone should have been impossible, but the Ardennes battles had littered the forest with wreckage. November 28th. Marcus volunteered for salvage detail. The official mission: recover usable ammunition and medical supplies from destroyed positions. The unofficial reality: scavenge anything that might prove valuable. He found it in the cockpit of a downed German Junkers Ju-88. The aircraft had crashed 3 weeks prior. Fire had gutted most of the fuselage, but the instrument panel remained partially intact, and painted across the altimeter, the artificial horizon, the fuel gauges, was a coating that glowed faintly in the wreckage's shadows. Radioluminescent paint. Radium-based compounds that emitted steady light through radioactive decay. German engineers used it so pilots could read instruments during night operations. Marcus used his trench knife to carefully scrape paint from 3 instruments, collected it in an empty ration tin. The amount was small, perhaps 2 tablespoons. But in darkness, even minimal luminescence could reveal thermal variations. The second component came from a destroyed American signal lamp. The ultraviolet bulb was cracked but functional. The 6-volt battery that powered it showed 60% charge. The third component required more creativity. Brass shell casings from spent .30-06 rounds, rubber gaskets from a gas mask, copper wire from broken radio equipment. He spent 4 hours in a foxhole, fingers numb, assembling a telescoping mount that could hold the UV light source parallel to his scope. The theory was sound. UV light would cause the radium paint, applied as a coating to makeshift filters made from medical X-ray film, to phosphoresce. That glow would highlight thermal differentials. Warm bodies against cold snow would appear as distinct shapes. The practice was uncertain. When he finally assembled the complete device on December 1st, it looked like something a child might build. Crude, asymmetrical, held together with wire and hope. Military optical engineers examining it after the war would declare it mechanically unsound, theoretically impossible to maintain accuracy through sustained fire. Marcus test-fired it on December 15th. 600 yards. German position. Single target. Smoking a cigarette near a bent tree. Through the modified scope, enhanced by radium-activated phosphorescence, the heat pattern was unmistakable. A human-shaped glow against the frozen landscape. Marcus compensated for windage, adjusted for bullet drop, exhaled halfway, squeezed, the Springfield cracked, the German dropped, the scope held 0. Marcus wrote in his notebook, "Device functional. Effective range confirms 600 yards. Thermal detection superior to standard optics in low-light conditions." He logged it as shot number 14. What he didn't log was the sound of boots approaching his position 90 seconds later. Staff Sergeant Reynolds stood over the foxhole, face unreadable in the darkness. What is that? Marcus had prepared for this moment, had rehearsed explanations, tactical advantages, statistical evidence. But Reynolds wasn't asking for justification. He was giving an order. "Pack it up, bring it to my position, now." In Reynolds's bunker, under lamplight, the device looked even more absurd. Brass casings, scavenged paint, wire, a flashlight battery duct taped to rifle furniture. Reynolds examined it for 3 full minutes without speaking. Finally, "Do you understand what you've done?" Created a low-light targeting system using salvaged materials. No. Reynolds set the device down carefully. "You've modified government property without authorization, used radioactive material without safety certification, created an untested weapons system, and discharged it in combat conditions without command approval." He paused. "Any one of those violations is court-martial worthy. All 4 together, they'd hang you." Marcus kept his voice steady. "It works, Sergeant. That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Reynolds stood, walked to the bunker entrance, stared into darkness. "The point is that armies run on standardization. We use the same rifles because we know they work. We follow the same tactics because they've been tested. We maintain the same protocols because unpredictability gets people killed." He turned back. "What happens if your device fails? What happens if the radioactive paint causes health issues? What happens if other soldiers start modifying equipment and something goes catastrophically wrong? What happens if we keep losing 40 men a month to nighttime engagements because we're following protocols designed for different conditions?" The silence stretched. Finally, Reynolds picked up the device, studied it again. His expression shifted slightly.
Something like grudging respect crossed his face.
I'm going to lock this in my footlocker. If you need it for authorized operations, you request it through proper channels. If I find out you've built another one, or if you take this without permission, I'm reporting you to the Provost Marshal. Clear? Clear, Sergeant. Marcus left the bunker empty-handed. He'd lost the device, but he'd kept the knowledge. And on December 16th, when German artillery announced the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge, when chaos consumed the American lines, when every soldier was scrambling to save equipment and evacuate positions, Marcus made a choice. He went back to Reynolds' bunker. The footlocker was unlocked. Reynolds was directing the evacuation 50 yards away. The device was right where it had been stored. Marcus took it, not as theft, as necessity, because he understood something Reynolds didn't yet know. Sometimes the forbidden thing is the only thing that works. And in the next 4 days, he would prove it in ways that would make German patrols vanish, in ways that would save 217 American lives, in ways that would haunt him for the next 50 years. December 17th, 1944. 0200 hours. The first German patrol died without understanding what killed them. 8 men, moving through darkness toward American positions. Confident in the cover of night, they'd done this a dozen times before. Every night, American sentries heard nothing until dawn revealed footprints in snow, proof that the enemy owned the darkness. Tonight was different. Marcus Sullivan watched them through his forbidden scope from 400 yards. The radium-coated filters glowed faintly, activated by the UV lamp's invisible radiation. Through that eerie phosphorescence, 8 glowing shapes moved against the frozen forest floor. Warm bodies, cold snow. The contrast was absolute. He'd positioned himself on a slight ridge, wind from the west at 3 knots, temperature -12 Fahrenheit. Snow crunching underfoot would betray any position change, so he'd committed to this spot for the duration. The German point man stopped, raised his fist. The patrol froze. Professional soldiers, well-trained, cautious. It didn't matter. Marcus's first shot took the point man through the chest. The sound echoed through frozen trees for 3 seconds. By the time it faded, Marcus had already worked the bolt, acquired the second target. The Germans scattered. Textbook response. Find cover, locate the shooter, return fire. But they were firing at darkness. At a muzzle flash they'd glimpsed 400 yards away. Their bullets cracked through branches 30 yards to Marcus's left. He fired again. A German soldier diving behind a fallen log, the warm outline clear even through partial concealment. Center mass. The bodies stopped moving. The remaining 6 began retreating, running, abandoning the assault. Marcus let them go. Not from mercy, from calculation. 6 men returning to their lines in panic would spread more fear than 6 dead men. They'd report an enemy who could see in absolute darkness, who could hit targets at ranges that should have been impossible, who operated in conditions that violated every tactical assumption. Marcus relocated 30 yards east, settled into a new position, began scanning for the next patrol. By dawn, he'd engaged 4 separate German units, 14 confirmed kills. 0 return fire came within 50 yards of his positions. He documented each shot in his notebook. Range, conditions, result. The same methodical record-keeping he'd used tracking deer in Minnesota. Except these weren't deer. These were men who'd never see home again because Marcus Sullivan had learned to read heat patterns in darkness. The notebook didn't record how that felt. December 18th brought something Marcus hadn't anticipated: silence. The previous night, German patrols had moved every hour, probing, testing, looking for weak points in American defenses. Tonight, the forest lay empty. Marcus scanned methodically, left to right, 400 yards out, 600 yards, 800. Nothing. No phosphorescent silhouettes. No movement. Just frozen wasteland and falling snow. At 0300 hours he heard it. Radio traffic. Faint. German voices on a captured frequency. Sektor 4. Keine Bewegung. Patrouille nicht zurückgekehrt. Sector 4. No movement. Patrol hasn't returned. Sektor 7. Gleiches. 2 Patrouillen vermisst. Sector 7. Same. 2 patrols missing. The transmission quality was poor, static, fragments of conversation, but the tone was unmistakable. Confusion, concern, growing fear. Keine Schüsse gehört, Männer einfach verschwunden. No shots heard, men simply vanished. Marcus understood the German confusion. From their perspective, patrols were disappearing without trace. No sustained firefights, no calls for support, no warning. Men walked into darkness and never returned. It violated their tactical experience. Snipers were predictable. They fired from concealed positions, gave away location with muzzle flash, could be suppressed with artillery, could be hunted with counter-sniper teams. But how do you hunt what you can't locate? How do you suppress what leaves no signature? The Germans were asking questions that had no conventional answers. By December 19th, they developed a theory. Marcus intercepted a radio communication at 1400 hours, daylight. German command coordinating with forward observers. Amerikaner haben neue Waffe, Infrarot möglicherweise. Spezialeinheit wird eingesetzt. Americans have new weapon, possibly infrared. Special unit being deployed, counter-snipers. Marcus had expected this. Every successful tactic eventually generates a response. The question was whether the response came fast enough to matter. He spent the afternoon preparing positions, primary, secondary, tertiary, escape routes from each, fields of fire mapped in his notebook, ranges pre-calculated. If they were sending their best, he needed to be better. Corporal Elias Thornton settled into the observation post beside Marcus at 16:30 hours. The spotter was 24. Veteran of Normandy, steady hands, good eyes. Dark hair already streaked with premature grey from what they'd both seen in France. You really think this thing works in total darkness? Elias studied the modified scope with professional skepticism. It works. Command's going to have your ass if they find out you're still using it. Command's not here. Elias grinned slightly. That's what I like about you, Sullivan. Absolute dedication to regulation compliance. They'd worked together for 3 weeks, developed the wordless communication that marked good sniper teams. Elias could read wind conditions by watching snow patterns, could estimate range within 10 yards using terrain features, could predict enemy movement based on tactical logic. More importantly, he trusted Marcus's judgment enough to not question decisions. And Marcus trusted Elias's observations enough to adjust fire based on his corrections. German counter-sniper teams supposedly inbound, Elias said, scanning the valley through binoculars. Intelligence thinks they're bringing Eastern Front veterans, men who've hunted Russian snipers in Stalingrad. Then they're used to urban warfare, close quarters. This is different terrain. Don't underestimate them. I don't. That's why we're here 4 hours early. The German counter-sniper team arrived at 1800 hours. Elias spotted them first through binoculars in fading light. Movement, 700 yards, 3 men, moving with tactical discipline. Marcus observed through his standard scope. 3 soldiers choosing a destroyed farmhouse for their position. Stone walls, multiple firing ports, excellent cover. They were setting a trap. The farmhouse overlooked the route Marcus had used for the previous 2 nights. They'd studied the pattern, identified likely positions. Now they'd wait for him to reveal himself with the first shot. Standard counter-sniper doctrine, sound tactics. Marcus watched them establish their position. 2 shooters, 1 spotter. The spotter carried optics that caught the last rays of sunset. Zeiss glass, 8-power magnification, pre-war quality. These aren't conscripts, Elias observed quietly. No, they're not. Through his scope, Marcus observed the lead sniper, older than the others, maybe 35. Face weathered by years of field service. He moved with economy, no wasted motion, checked his rifle 3 times before settling into position. A craftsman, like Marcus. Under different circumstances, they might have respected each other. The German spotter began systematic scanning, left to right, studying the terrain where they expected Marcus to appear. They were looking in the wrong direction. Marcus had positioned himself 800 yards south.
Not on their expected route. The range was extreme.
The shot was technically possible, but statistically improbable. As darkness fell completely, Marcus activated the UV lamp. The phosphorescent coating began to glow faintly. Through the enhanced optics, 3 radiating heat sources appeared in the farmhouse ruins. "I've got them," Marcus whispered. "You can see them? In this?" Elias stared into darkness. Through standard binoculars, the farmhouse was invisible. 3 men, 2 prone, 1 in elevated position for spotting. Elias shook his head slowly. "That thing actually works." "Told you." "Range?" 720, maybe 730. "Christ, that's—" The sudden whistle of incoming artillery cut him off. The shell hit 30 yards behind their position. Then another. Closer. "They're bracketing us!" Elias grabbed his equipment. "Someone spotted—" The third shell impacted directly on their foxhole's edge. The concussion threw Marcus sideways, ears ringing. Vision blurred. When it cleared, Elias was screaming. Shrapnel had torn through his left shoulder. Blood poured between his fingers as he clutched the wound. More fragments had shredded his binoculars, destroyed his range cards, turned his equipment into twisted metal. Marcus dragged him to better cover, applied pressure to the wound. The blood flow was severe but not arterial. Elias would survive if they got him to an aid station. "Medic!" Marcus's shout was swallowed by another shell impact. 2 soldiers emerged from the darkness, grabbed Elias, began dragging him toward the rear. "Sullivan!" Elias gasped through pain. "Don't do anything stupid without me." "I'll manage." "That's what I'm afraid of." Marcus watched them carry Elias away through the falling snow. For the first time in 3 weeks, he'd operate without a spotter, without someone to confirm ranges, without backup observations, without another set of eyes to watch for threats. Completely alone. The German counter-sniper team was still out there, still waiting. They probably called in the artillery strike, knew Marcus's general area now. The smart move was to relocate, disengage, wait for another opportunity. Marcus settled back into position, raised the forbidden scope, located the 3 heat signatures in the farmhouse. The Germans had just wounded his spotter, had tried to kill him with artillery. They represented the elite of German sniper doctrine, men who'd survived the Eastern Front, who'd hunted Soviet snipers through Stalingrad's rubble. Tonight, they'd learned that darkness had a new owner. Marcus waited. Patience was the sniper's primary weapon, more important than marksmanship, more valuable than equipment. The man who moved first usually died first. The Germans understood this. They settled into absolute stillness. 40 minutes passed. The spotter's discipline broke first. He shifted weight, reached for a canteen. 3 seconds of movement. Marcus fired. 720 yards, the longest shot he'd ever attempted in combat conditions. The bullet's flight time was just over 1 second. Enough time for the spotter to hear the report and begin reacting. Not enough time to avoid it. Through the scope, the glowing shape collapsed. The 2 shooters erupted into motion. Training took over. One scanned for muzzle flash. The other began low crawling toward better cover. Marcus had already worked the bolt, already acquired the second target. The crawling shooter presented a smaller profile, harder shot, but phosphorescent enhancement didn't care about profile size. Heat was heat. Marcus led the movement by 18 inches. Squeezed. The second warm outline stopped moving. The remaining German shooter never located Marcus's position. He fired 3 shots at empty forest, then retreated, sprinting through darkness, abandoning his team. Marcus let him run. Professional courtesy. The man would report back, would tell command that the American sniper had eliminated their counter-sniper team at a range that shouldn't have been possible, in conditions that shouldn't have permitted target acquisition. The fear would spread faster than bullets. Marcus relocated immediately. The protocol was automatic. Shoot and move. Never stay where you fired from. As he crawled away from the position, something in his peripheral vision caught his attention. The destroyed farmhouse. The dead spotter. Against every tactical instinct, Marcus approached the farmhouse. Took 15 minutes. moved in absolute silence, checked for additional enemy positions. The spotter was 19, maybe 20. Young face frozen in final surprise. A photograph had fallen from his jacket pocket. A family portrait. Mother, father, 2 younger sisters.
The spotter standing behind them in dress uniform, smiling. On the back, handwriting in German, Komm sicher nach Hause, Heinrich. Wir lieben dich. Come home safely, Heinrich. We love you. Marcus stared at the photograph for 30 seconds. Heinrich would never come home. His mother would receive a telegram. Killed in action. No details, no explanation, just absence where a son used to be. 19 years old. Marcus had been 13 when he killed his first deer. His father had made him field dress it, had made him understand that taking a life required acknowledging what was lost.
Don't waste it, his father had said. Don't pretend it doesn't matter. It matters. You just decided something else mattered more. Marcus placed the photograph back in Heinrich's pocket, positioned the body respectfully. Then he returned to American lines. His notebook that night recorded shot number 27. It didn't record the photograph,
Didn't record the name Heinrich, didn't record the fact that for the next 50 years, Marcus would remember that face more clearly than most of the men he'd served beside. Some kills were clean, necessary, professional. Some kills were young men with families who loved them. Both truths existed simultaneously. December 20th, the longest night. Marcus had been in position since 0400 hours. The designated observation post overlooked the northern approach to Baker Company's perimeter. Intelligence suggested German forces might probe this sector. Command wanted early warning. What Marcus found was worse than probing. At 20:30 hours, heat signatures began appearing at the forest edge. 1, then 3, then 7, then 12, then 23, a full platoon. Moving with coordinated precision, spread formation, professional spacing. These weren't scouts. This was an assault element. Marcus activated the UV lamp fully, adjusted the phosphorescent filters. The thermal contrast became sharper. And then he saw something that made his blood freeze. Behind the first platoon, 800 yards out, more glowing shapes emerging from the tree line. Dozens, no, hundreds. This wasn't a patrol. This wasn't even a company-level assault. This was the vanguard of a battalion. Marcus's mind raced through the tactical mathematics. The 23 men in front carried specialized equipment. He could see the elongated shapes now. Flamethrowers, Satchel charges,
wire cutters. They were the breach team. Their job? Cut through American wire. Eliminate forward positions with flamethrowers. Create a gap in the perimeter. Behind them, at least 400 more soldiers, waiting for the signal, waiting for the breach team to succeed. Then they'd pour through, overrun Baker Company, seize the supply depot, potentially collapse the entire sector. If Marcus let this platoon succeed, Baker Company wouldn't just lose men, they'd lose the entire position, and with it, possibly Bastogne itself. The realization hit like a physical blow. 23 men weren't just a tactical problem, they were the key that would unlock the door for 400 more. Marcus keyed his radio. Lightning 6 to Baker Actual. Enemy movement, grid reference November 7-4. Approximately platoon strength advancing your position. Multiple units in depth. Estimate battalion size force. Static crackled. Then Captain Silas Brennan's voice, thick with sleep. Lightning 6, we have negative visibility from our positions. Cannot confirm contact. Are you certain of numbers? Affirmative. 23 personnel in lead element. Hundreds more in follow-on waves. They're carrying breach equipment, flamethrowers. This is the main assault. Long pause. Lightning 6, we're sending flare teams to confirm visual contact. Hold position. Do not engage until we verify. Marcus watched the German advance continue. 350 yards. 300. The flare teams would take 5 minutes to position. The Germans would be inside Baker Company's wire in 4. 217 men sleeping in foxholes, wood-reinforced bunkers that would burn like kindling when flamethrower fuel ignited them. The radio crackled again. Lightning 6, this is Baker Actual. Flare teams report negative visibility, heavy snow,
Cannot confirm enemy presence. Orders stand. Do not engage. Conserve ammunition. We'll establish defensive positions and wait for daylight confirmation. Baker Actual, by daylight they'll be inside your... Orders are orders, Lightning 6. Hold fire. Baker Actual out. The radio went silent. Through the scope, Marcus watched the German platoon reach 250 yards. The lead element had produced wire cutters. They'd identified the American perimeter wire, were preparing to breach it silently. Behind them, 800 yards out, the main force waited. 400 soldiers, ready to exploit the gap. Marcus's finger rested on the trigger. Every regulation said, obey orders, trust command. They see the bigger picture. Every instinct said, you can see what they can't see. You know what they don't know. And in approximately 3 minutes, 217 men were going to die screaming in fires they never saw coming, followed by a breach that would compromise the entire Bastogne perimeter. The choice was mathematically simple. Disobey orders, face court-martial, possible execution for insubordination during combat, or obey orders. Watch friends burn, watch the sector collapse, live with that decision for the rest of his life. Marcus thought of his father, stockade for 3 weeks, court-martial, Distinguished Service Cross presented after they'd nearly shot him for saving his platoon. Sometimes the right thing and the regulation thing aren't the same thing. He thought of Elias, wounded because Marcus had drawn German attention. He thought of Heinrich's photograph, the family that would never see their son again. He thought of the 217 men who had no idea death was cutting through their wire. Marcus chambered around. Through the scope, the German officer leading the assault raised his hand. The platoon stopped. Final equipment check before the assault. The officer was 40 yards ahead of his men, studying American positions through binoculars, confident in the darkness, certain of surprise. Marcus adjusted for windage, compensated for bullet drop at 300 yards. The cold air would affect trajectory. He calculated the correction, made the adjustment, controlled his breathing. The officer lowered his binoculars, turned to signal his men forward. Marcus fired. The Springfield's crack shattered the night silence. Through the scope, the officer's radiating warmth collapsed instantly. The German platoon erupted into chaos. No one knew where the shot originated. No one understood how a sniper could acquire targets in total darkness. Marcus worked the bolt, acquired the radio operator. The phosphorescent glow made him visible even as he dove for cover. Fired. The second heat pattern dropped. No radio meant no coordination with the battalion behind them. No coordination meant no organized assault. The main force would hesitate, would wait for signals that would never come. Marcus continued firing, methodical, professional. Each shot placed with the precision of a craftsman who'd spent 13 years learning his trade. 8 shots in 40 seconds. The German officer, the radio operator, 6 soldiers carrying flamethrowers. Each shot found its target. Each target carried equipment that could have killed dozens. The remaining Germans broke, scattered, retreated into the forest in complete disorganization. Behind them, 800 yards out, the main force hesitated, waited for the signal to advance. The signal never came. Without confirmation of breach success, the battalion commander held position. The assault died before it began. Across the valley, Baker Company had come fully alert. Flares shot into the sky, illuminated the retreating Germans, who were now exposed in open ground. Machine guns opened fire, cut down the exposed soldiers. What had been a coordinated 2-phase assault, breach team followed by battalion exploitation, became scattered survivors fleeing for their lives. The entire German operation collapsed in less than 2 minutes. Baker Company was safe. The Bastogne perimeter held, and Marcus Sullivan had just committed the most serious violation of military law short of desertion. He began disassembling his position immediately. The German response would be massive. Artillery would saturate this sector within minutes. Every gun within range would zero in on the location of those 8 shots. As he moved through the forest, carrying the forbidden scope, the first shells began falling.
impacting exactly where he'd been positioned 90 seconds earlier. The explosions lit the night sky behind him. Marcus made it to American lines at 115 hours. Staff Sergeant Reynolds was waiting, but he wasn't alone. Captain Silas Brennan stood beside him, and next to Brennan, an officer Marcus didn't recognize, Major's insignia, Ordnance Corps patch. "Private Sullivan," Brennan said. His voice was carefully neutral. "This is Major Howard Anderson. He's been monitoring German radio traffic for the past 72 hours. Anderson stepped forward. He was 40, graying at the temples, eyes that missed nothing. "They're calling you der Nachtjäger," Anderson said. "The Night Hunter. German command believes we've deployed advanced infrared detection technology. They've suspended all night operations in this sector until they can develop countermeasures." He paused. "They think we have technology we don't possess. That gives us a psychological advantage worth more than a division. I intend to make their assumption reality." Anderson's gaze shifted to the scope in Marcus's hands. "Is that the device?" Marcus looked at Reynolds. Reynolds nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. I need to see it. Now. Not to confiscate it, to replicate it." Marcus handed over the modified scope. Anderson examined it under lamplight with the focused intensity of an engineer examining an equation. Turned it over, tested the mount, studied the phosphorescent coating, activated the UV lamp briefly. After 2 full minutes of silent examination, "This shouldn't work." "It works, sir," Marcus said. "I can see that it works. What I'm saying is that according to every principle of optical engineering I know, this design should lose accuracy after a dozen shots. The mounting system is improvised. The phosphorescent coating is unstable. The UV activation should create thermal bloom that destroys image clarity." He looked up. "But German casualties suggest otherwise. Walk me through the construction." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus explained. The radium-based paint salvaged from German aircraft instruments. The UV lamp from signal equipment. The filters made from X-ray film. The brass casing mounts designed to absorb recoil. The theoretical basis, thermal differential detection through phosphorescent enhancement. Captain Brennan listened with the attention of a commander recognizing tactical advantage. Anderson took extensive notes, asked technical questions that revealed deep understanding of optical physics. Test the mount's stability under simulated recoil. Examine the phosphorescent coating under magnification. "The coating is degrading," he observed. "You have maybe 40 more shots before phosphorescence drops below useful levels." "I know, sir. I've been monitoring the decay rate." Anderson smiled slightly. "You've been monitoring the decay rate. Did they teach radioactive decay calculations in sniper school, Private?" "No, sir. I read physics textbooks. Before the war." "What else did you read?" "Optics, thermodynamics, whatever the Clearwater Library had." Anderson closed his notebook, looked at Brennan. "Captain, I need this man reassigned to my technical unit, temporarily, and I need authorization to manufacture 12 copies of this device using proper materials and precision engineering." Brennan frowned. "Major, the regulations regarding unauthorized modifications will be addressed through appropriate channels. Right now, Private Sullivan has created a capability that's causing the enemy to fundamentally alter their tactical doctrine. They're surrendering night operations. That's a strategic victory. My job is to turn one improvised prototype into a standardized system." He turned to Marcus. "Private Sullivan, you've created something that violates regulations but saves lives. I'm going to make it legal. Will you work with me?" Marcus looked at Brennan. Brennan's expression remained neutral, but he nodded once. Permission granted. "Yes, sir." Reynolds spoke for the first time. "What about the insubordination charge? He disobeyed direct orders to hold fire." Brennan's response was immediate. "Staff Sergeant, I gave those orders based on the information available to me at the time. Private Sullivan had information I didn't have. Specifically, visual confirmation of a battalion-size assault force that our flare teams couldn't detect." He paused. His decision to engage wasn't insubordination. It was tactical initiative based on superior intelligence. He saved 217 men in my company, possibly prevented the loss of our entire sector. I'm recommending him for the Silver Star. Reynolds looked like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it. "Yes, sir." Anderson picked up the modified scope carefully. "Private, I'll need you to document every aspect of this device's construction, materials,
Assembly sequence, operational procedures. Can you do that?
Yes, sir. Good. We start at 0600 hours. Get some rest. You're going to need it." As the officers departed, Reynolds pulled Marcus aside. "You got lucky." "I know. If Anderson hadn't been monitoring German communications, if Brennan hadn't seen the results firsthand, if that assault had failed for any other reason..." Reynolds let the implication hang. "I know, Sergeant." Reynolds studied him for a long moment.
"The device works. I was wrong about that. But you understand why I tried to stop you, right? Why we have regulations. Because improvisation can go wrong in ways that get people killed." "Exactly. Tonight it went right. But the next soldier who modifies equipment might not have your skills, might not understand the physics, might create something that explodes and kills his entire team." Marcus nodded. "That's why Major Anderson wants to standardize it. Make it safe. Make it reliable." "Yeah," Reynolds almost smiled. "Turning your illegal hack into official equipment.
There's irony in that. My father would have appreciated it." "How's that?" "He told me the Army hates innovation until it works. Then they take credit for it." Reynolds did smile at that. "Your father's a wise man. Get some rest, Sullivan. You've earned it." Over the next 11 days, Marcus Sullivan became something he'd never imagined, a military technical consultant.
Major Anderson brought in 2 optical engineers from Army Ordnance. They set up a field laboratory in a reinforced bunker, studied Marcus's device with the intensity of scientists examining an alien artifact. The lead engineer, a civilian named Dr. Philip Hartwell from MIT, spent an entire day just examining the phosphorescent coating. "The radium concentration is inconsistent," he observed. "Some areas glow brighter than others. In a combat environment, that creates targeting errors." "I compensate for the variation," Marcus explained.
"After the first few shots, you learn which areas of the scope give the clearest thermal detection." "That's a learned skill. What we need is a manufactured solution." Hartwell made notes. "If we synthesize the coating under controlled conditions, we can ensure uniform phosphorescence across the entire filter." Over the following days, they worked to replace each improvised component with precision-manufactured equivalents.
The phosphorescent coating was synthesized in a portable laboratory.
Consistent concentration. Uniform application. Expected operational life, 3 months instead of 3 weeks. The UV lamp was redesigned. More efficient bulb. Better battery life. Waterproof housing. The purple glow that had concerned Marcus, potentially visible to enemy observers at close range, was eliminated through improved filtering. The mounting system was engineered to maintain 0 through 500 rounds of sustained fire. The brass casings and wire were replaced with machined aluminum and precision fasteners. By December 28th, 12 improved scopes existed. 12 sniper teams were selected, trained in operation, deployed across the Bastogne perimeter. The results were immediate and devastating. German night patrols in the Bastogne sector had operated with near impunity for weeks. They'd grown confident, predictable. They followed routes, established patterns. The Sullivan scopes, as soldiers had begun calling them, made those patterns fatal. Night of December 24th, Christmas Eve. German forces attempted a major assault on American supply depots. 3 companies, over 400 men, moving under cover of darkness and heavy snowfall, weather conditions that should have grounded all defensive operations. 6 sniper teams equipped with Sullivan scopes engaged from concealed positions. The Germans never reached the supply depot. Casualties were catastrophic. Not because American forces had numerical superiority, because German soldiers couldn't understand how they were being killed in conditions where visibility should have been 0. No muzzle flashes visible through the snow. No warning. Just men dropping in darkness from shooters they couldn't locate. Officers trying to rally their troops. Radio operators calling for support. Squad leaders attempting to organize withdrawal. Each became a glowing target through phosphorescent enhancement. The assault broke within 20 minutes. Survivors retreated in disorder. abandoned equipment, left wounded behind in their panic to escape the invisible enemy. German command issued an emergency directive at 0200 hours. Marcus heard it through radio intercept. An alle Einheiten im Sektor Bastogne. Alle Nachtoperationen sind bis auf Weiteres eingestellt.
Ich wiederhole, keine Patrouillen nach Einbruch der Dunkelheit. Der Feind verfügt über unbekannte Nachtsichtfähigkeiten. Bis Gegenmaßnahmen entwickelt sind, erfolgen alle Operationen nur bei Tageslicht. To all units in Bastogne sector, all night operations suspended until further notice. I repeat, no patrols after dark. Enemy possesses unknown night vision capabilities. Until countermeasures are developed, all operations daylight only. The Germans had surrendered the night. Major Anderson, listening to the same intercept, looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. Do you understand what you've accomplished? A single improvised device has caused an entire German army group to alter their tactical doctrine. They've ceded operational freedom during half of every 24-hour period. He paused. Wars are won by men who see problems differently. You saw a problem, insufficient night vision capability, and solved it using materials most soldiers would have discarded as junk. That's not just innovation, that's genius under pressure. Marcus didn't feel like a genius. He felt tired, cold, haunted by the faces of the men he'd killed. Heinrich's photograph. The young German soldiers who died because Marcus could see thermal patterns they couldn't. I just wanted to stop losing friends to nighttime attacks, sir. That's what makes it genius. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were solving a specific problem. The best innovations come from necessity, not inspiration. By January 1945, conservative estimates attributed over 300 German casualties to Sullivan-equipped snipers. The captured directive suspending night operations represented a significant tactical victory. American forces gained operational freedom during hours when they'd previously been defensive and vulnerable. For Marcus, the numbers represented something else. 73 confirmed kills, his personal count. 73 men whose lives ended because a Minnesota farm boy had learned to see heat signatures in darkness. The physical cost was severe. 7 weeks in frozen foxholes, his hands shook constantly. Nerve damage from sustained cold exposure. Vision degraded from too many hours staring through scopes. The medical officer diagnosed severe eye strain and prescribed rest. Marcus refused. Still have ammunition, still have targets. But the psychological cost was worse. Most nights, Marcus dreamed of glowing shapes, phosphorescent silhouettes materializing from darkness. Each time he pulled the dream trigger, the heat pattern resolved into a face. Heinrich, the 19-year-old with the family photograph, a German machine gunner, 42 years old, who'd screamed for his mother after Marcus's bullet shattered his spine. An officer who'd carried a worn copy of Goethe's poetry in his jacket pocket. 73 faces. 73 lives ended because Marcus Sullivan had refused to accept that darkness made combat impossible. He wrote a letter home to his father on January 15, 1945. You told me to document everything, to justify my thinking. I can justify every shot tactically. Every man I killed was a legitimate military target, engaged under rules of warfare. But I can't justify how I feel about it. You warned me the army would make me choose between the rights thing and the regulation thing. You were correct. I chose. Men are alive because of that choice. Baker Company, possibly hundreds more across the sector. But I'm not sure I'll ever feel like I made the right choice. Just the necessary one. Is there a difference? Or is that just what we tell ourselves to sleep at night? His father's response arrived 3 weeks later. February 8th, 1945. Son, the fact that you're asking that question is proof you made the right choice. Men who kill without questioning are dangerous. Men who question but kill anyway when necessary are soldiers. You are a soldier, a good one. And good soldiers carry the weight of what they've done. They don't celebrate it, they don't forget it, they live with it. That burden is the price of doing what others can't or won't do. It's not fair, it's not glorious, but it's honest. Come home safe. We'll figure out how to carry this weight together. Your father
Marcus carried that letter in his jacket pocket for the rest of the war. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. Marcus Sullivan was awarded the Silver Star in a ceremony at regimental headquarters. The citation carefully avoided mentioning unauthorized equipment modifications. Instead, it emphasized exceptional courage and battlefield initiative in engaging superior enemy forces under adverse conditions. The medal felt heavy, not because of the physical weight, because of what it represented. Recognition for killing 73 men, praise for innovation born from desperation. Captain Brennan pinned the medal to Marcus's uniform, shook his hand, leaned close and whispered, "You saved my company. I'll never forget that." Marcus nodded, didn't trust himself to speak. After the ceremony, Major Anderson pulled him aside. The Sullivan scope is being evaluated for standardized production. Initial tests are promising. If approved, it could be issued to sniper teams across all theaters. That's good, sir. There's something else. Army Ordnance wants to interview you. Document the development process, your background, the inspiration. They're calling it a case study in battlefield innovation. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Sir, I prefer to just go home." Anderson studied him carefully. "You don't want recognition?" "I want to forget, sir, not remember." Anderson nodded slowly. "I understand. The interviews are voluntary. I'll tell them you declined." "Thank you, sir." "Sullivan, what you created changed how we fight at night. That matters. Whether you want credit or not, it matters." "I know, sir. I can't think about it without seeing their faces." "Heinrich?" Marcus looked up sharply. "You know about that?" "I know you approached enemy dead after the counter-sniper engagement, against protocol. I also know why." Anderson's expression softened. "War requires us to do things that violate our humanity. The fact that you still see their humanity says something important about who you are." He handed Marcus a folder. "This is your discharge paperwork. You'll be processed out at Fort Dix. Should be home by November. If you ever want to talk about what you created, what it meant, my contact information is inside." Marcus took the folder. "Thank you, sir, for understanding." "Thank you, Private Sullivan, for seeing what the rest of us couldn't." October 15th, 1945. Marcus Sullivan was honorably discharged, 2 years, 7 months of service. He returned to Clearwater, Minnesota on October 23rd. No parade, no public recognition. The Sullivan scope remained classified. His role in its development buried in military archives. He took a job at Anderson Manufacturing, operating lathes, the same precision work he'd done before the war, the same tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The familiarity was comforting, quiet, predictable. He married Ellen Mitchell in November, his childhood sweetheart who'd waited 2 years. They bought a small house 3 blocks from his parents, started a life that looked completely ordinary from the outside. But inside, Marcus carried 73 deaths. He never spoke about them. When veterans gathered to share war stories, Marcus stayed quiet. When neighbors asked about his service, he deflected. "Just did my job. Lucky to come home." Ellen noticed the nightmares. The way he'd wake gasping, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there, seeing glowing shapes in darkness. She didn't press, just held him when the dreams were bad, made coffee when he couldn't sleep, gave him space to work through what he'd carried home. In 1947, their first child was born, Margaret. Then William in 1949, Thomas in 1952, Sarah in 1955. Marcus threw himself into fatherhood with intensity that surprised everyone who knew him. He coached Little League, built a treehouse that became legendary in the neighborhood, taught all 4 children to fish, to hunt, to read the forest. But he never taught them to shoot at night. "Some skills are better left in the past," he told Ellen when she asked why. The work at Anderson Manufacturing was steady, reliable. By 1950, Marcus had earned a reputation as one of their best machinists. Precision, attention to detail, never missed a day. but something was missing.
The physics textbooks he'd read before the war still interested him. The optical principles, the engineering challenges. His mind kept returning to the problem of low-light visibility. In 1952, he began sketching designs in a notebook, not for military applications, for civilian use. Hunters who needed better optics in dawn and dusk conditions. Wildlife researchers studying nocturnal animals. He filed his first patent in 1953, a civilian hunting scope incorporating low-light enhancement principles. Not using radioactive materials, he'd learned enough about long-term radiation exposure to avoid that. Instead, using passive light-gathering technology, larger objective lenses, better coating, more efficient light transmission. The patent was approved in 1954. By 1955, Marcus had founded Sullivan Optics, a small company, 5 employees, operating out of a converted barn, specializing in precision optical equipment for hunters and researchers. The company remained small by design. Marcus deliberately avoided military contracts, refused to bid on government projects. When Army Ordnance contacted him about developing improved night vision systems, he declined. "I've contributed what I'm going to contribute to military applications," he told them. "Find someone else." In a 1968 interview with Outdoor Life magazine, one of the few times he discussed his work publicly, Marcus explained his philosophy. "Innovation should serve life, not death. I spent too much of my youth making tools for killing. The rest of my life will be spent making tools for observation, for understanding, for appreciating the natural world without destroying it." The interviewer asked about his military service. "I was a soldier. I did what soldiers do. I prefer not to discuss it." Throughout the 1950s and 60s, Marcus maintained correspondence with several members of his former unit. Elias Thornton, his wounded spotter, had become a police officer in Chicago. They exchanged letters 3 or 4 times a year. Elias's letters often reflected on their shared experiences. From a 1963 letter. "I still think about that night you operated alone. After I got hit, you took on the German counter-sniper team by yourself, eliminated them at a range that still seems impossible. But what I remember most is what you said when I got back from the hospital. You didn't brag, didn't celebrate. You just said, 'I did what needed doing. Wish I hadn't needed to.' That stuck with me. In police work, I've had to use force, had to make hard calls. Every time, I remember your words. Do what needs doing. Don't celebrate it. Carry the weight. Thank you for that lesson." Marcus kept every letter from Elias, from the other members of Baker Company who'd survived, reminders of the men whose lives had been saved by his forbidden innovation. But he kept them in a box, in the attic, didn't read them often. Some memories were better left stored away. In 1979, 34 years after the war, the Army declassified the Sullivan Scope reports. Historians examining newly released documents discovered references to improvised night vision enhancement systems deployed during the Battle of the Bulge. Further investigation revealed the full story: the Minnesota farm boy, the salvage materials, the impact on German tactical doctrine. The Clearwater Gazette ran a front-page story. Local veterans' innovation changed Battle of Bulge. Marcus was 76 years old, retired, living in the same house he'd bought in 1945. A reporter from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune interviewed him. "Mr. Sullivan, these declassified reports say you created technology that saved hundreds of lives, that you violated regulations to do it, that German forces suspended all night operations because of your device. How do you feel about that legacy?" Marcus sat in his living room, surrounded by photographs of his children and grandchildren, considered the question for a long time. "I feel like I was a soldier doing my job with the tools available. Lots of men did extraordinary things in that war. I just happened to be good with a rifle and lucky enough to survive." "But you innovated." "I adapted. There's a difference. Innovation suggests I was trying to create something new. I was trying to solve a specific problem, how to see targets in darkness so my friends wouldn't die in nighttime attacks. The solution came from necessity,
not inspiration. Do you regret the violations? Breaking regulations? I regret that violations were necessary, but given the same circumstances, I'd make the same choice. Sometimes rules are tools, not goals. When the tool doesn't fit the problem, you find a better tool.
Or you build one.
What about the men you killed? Marcus's expression shifted, became distant. The reporter noticed his hands trembling slightly. 73 men. I remember the number. Not all their faces, but I remember the number. They were soldiers following orders, like me. They died because I was slightly better at this specific task on those specific days in December 1944. He paused. That doesn't make me proud. It makes me sad that the world needed men like me.
That young men had to die because other men decided war was the answer to political problems.
Do you consider yourself a hero? No. I consider myself a man who did what needed doing and has spent the rest of his life trying to build things instead of destroy them. Heroes are the men who didn't come home. I'm just someone who survived and tried to make that survival mean something. The interview was published on November 11th, 1979. Veterans Day.
It attracted attention from military historians, documentary filmmakers, veterans organizations.
Marcus declined most interview requests, but he agreed to donate the original Sullivan scope to the United States Army Ordnance Museum in Aberdeen, Maryland. In 1995, at age 92, he made the trip to Aberdeen for the donation ceremony. The scope was displayed in a special case. Alongside it, his notebook. 73 entries, each one documenting a shot, a range, a life ended.
The display label read, Field Expedient Optical Assembly, Sullivan Scope, improvised by PFC Marcus Sullivan, 101st Airborne Division, December 1944, Battle of the Bulge, constructed from salvaged German radioluminescent paint, signal lamp components, and brass shell casings. First successful night vision enhancement system deployed in combat conditions. Estimated 300-plus enemy casualties attributed to Sullivan-equipped sniper teams, December 1944 to January 1945. German forces suspended all night operations in Bastogne sector, December 28, 1944, citing unknown American night vision capabilities. Principles developed by Sullivan influenced post-war night vision technology research. Testament to American ingenuity and battlefield adaptation under extreme conditions. Marcus stood before the display for several minutes, silent. Finally, he spoke to the museum director. Make sure people understand the cost. It's not just about the innovation. It's about the 73 men who died. They deserve to be remembered too. We'll include that context, Mr. Sullivan. Good, because I've spent 50 years making sure I never forget them. Other people shouldn't either. By 2018, 74 years after the Battle of the Bulge, military historian Robert Carlson had compiled the most comprehensive account of the Sullivan scope and its impact. His book, Invisible Victories, Unauthorized Innovation in World War II, dedicated an entire chapter to Marcus's story. Using declassified documents, captured German records, and interviews with surviving veterans from both sides, Carlson presented a complete picture of how one soldier's willingness to break regulations changed the tactical calculus of a pivotal battle. The book revealed details that had remained classified for decades. The Sullivan scope's phosphorescent enhancement principle had directly influenced first-generation Starlight scope development in the 1950s. Scientists at Bell Laboratories studying Marcus's device incorporated elements of his thermal contrast detection approach into electronic systems. Modern third-generation night vision, the technology used by American forces in every conflict since 1991, traced its conceptual lineage back to a Minnesota farm boy scraping radium paint from German aircraft instruments. Most significantly, Carlson obtained and translated German military records from the Bastogne campaign. A directive dated December 28, 1944. All units Bastogne sector.
Night patrol operations suspended indefinitely.
American forces demonstrate capability for precision engagement in zero visibility conditions. Assume advanced detection technology deployed. All offensive operations restricted to daylight hours until countermeasures developed. Intelligence assessment. Enemy possesses infrared or radiometric detection systems. Conventional camouflage and movement discipline ineffective. Recommend immediate research into counter-detection methods. The directive had been signed by the German Army Group commander. It represented a complete tactical surrender of nighttime operational freedom. American commanders at the time hadn't fully understood why German night attacks suddenly stopped. They'd attributed it to weather, casualties, supply disruptions. The truth was simpler. Marcus Sullivan had made them too afraid to move in darkness. Carlson interviewed surviving German veterans for the book. Their accounts corroborated American reports and added chilling detail. Klaus Hoffmann, former Wehrmacht corporal, 94 years old at the time of the interview. We called him der Nachtjäger, the night hunter. We believed he could see souls in darkness. It was supernatural, impossible. Men would be talking, smoking, relaxed because it was night, and snipers don't operate at night. Then suddenly, Hans is dead, shot from nowhere. No sound of approach, no muzzle flash visible, just death. We tried to locate him, sent our best. They died too, at ranges that shouldn't permit accurate fire. When command ordered us to stop night patrols, we were relieved. Better to fight in daylight against enemies you can see than to face a ghost who owns the darkness. Hoffmann's testimony provided confirmation from the enemy's perspective. The Sullivan scope hadn't just killed Germans, it had broken their psychological confidence in their ability to operate at night. That psychological defeat was as significant as the physical casualties. Marcus Sullivan died peacefully on March 3, 1993, 70 years old, surrounded by family in the same house he'd lived in for 48 years. His obituary in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune mentioned his Silver Star, his service in the 101st Airborne, his successful optical manufacturing company. It didn't mention the 73 men. The forbidden device. The nights when German patrols vanished from the Ardennes forest. Those stories lived in military archives, in historian accounts, in lessons taught to officer candidates about the balance between discipline and initiative. But the most significant legacy came in 2020. The United States Army Night Vision and Electronic Sensors Directorate at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, opened a new research facility dedicated to innovation in low-light combat systems. They named it the Sullivan Innovation Center. The dedication ceremony included remarks from the Army Chief of Staff, attendance from optical engineers, representatives from major defense contractors, and one special guest, Friedrich Hoffmann, 68 years old, grandson of Klaus Hoffmann, the German veteran who'd called Marcus der Nachtjäger. Friedrich had requested permission to speak. The army approved. He stood before the assembled military personnel and read a letter he'd written to Marcus's daughter after her father's death. Dear Mrs. Sullivan, my name is Friedrich Hoffmann. I am the grandson of Klaus Hoffmann, who served in the Wehrmacht during the Battle of the Bulge. My grandfather passed away in 2019 at age 96. Before he died, he told me a story about an American sniper called der Nachtjäger, a man who could see in darkness, who killed many German soldiers, who terrified an entire regiment. I researched this story. I learned about your father, about the device he created from salvaged materials, about the 73 men he killed. One of those men was not my grandfather. In December 1944, my grandfather was part of a patrol ordered to attack American positions at night. His squad was moving through the forest when their sergeant suddenly collapsed, shot from invisible distance. Then the radio operator fell. Then 2 more men. My grandfather ran. He violated orders. He abandoned his position and retreated. By every measure of military discipline, he was a coward. But he survived. He returned home to Germany in 1945, married my grandmother, raised my father, lived to see me born. I exist because your father let my grandfather run into the darkness that night. I don't know if it was mercy. Maybe it was tactics. Your father chose different targets.
Maybe my grandfather simply got lucky. But I wanted you to know. Your father's story isn't just about the 73 men he killed. It's also about the men he didn't kill. The choices he made about when to shoot and when to let someone live. My grandfather said your father was the most terrifying enemy he ever faced, but also the most professional. He never saw your father fire at wounded men, never saw him shoot soldiers who were clearly retreating, never took shots that weren't necessary. In a war full of cruelty, your father practiced a kind of restrained violence that my grandfather respected. 3 generations of my family exist because of choices made in darkness 76 years ago. I thought you should know that. With gratitude, Friedrich Hoffmann. When Friedrich finished reading, there was silence in the ceremony hall. Then Marcus's daughter, Margaret Sullivan Chen, 73 years old, stood and embraced Friedrich. They held each other for a long moment. The daughter of the sniper and the grandson of the soldier who'd run away. 2 people who existed on opposite sides of decisions made in December 1944. The Army Chief of Staff cleared his throat, resumed the ceremony. The dedication plaque was unveiled. It bore a quote from Marcus's 1972 speech at Fort Benning Infantry School. Innovation isn't about being smarter than regulations. It's about understanding that rules are tools, not goals. Sometimes the tool doesn't fit the problem. When lives depend on solving that problem, you find a better tool, or you build one. After the ceremony, Margaret Sullivan Chen requested an addition to the plaque. The Army agreed. Today, visitors to the Sullivan Innovation Center see this complete text. Innovation isn't about being smarter than regulations. It's about understanding that rules are tools, not goals. Sometimes, the tool doesn't fit the problem. When lives depend on solving that problem, you find a better tool, or you build one. But innovation in service of death carries a cost. 73 men died in the Ardennes forest because Marcus Sullivan learned to see what others couldn't. 1 man lived because Marcus chose not to pull the trigger on a retreating soldier. Both truths matter. Dedicated to those who see in darkness, and to those who choose mercy when mercy is possible. Marcus Sullivan, 1923 to 1993. The greatest threat in combat isn't enemy strength, but our inability to see beyond our own limitations. 73 men died in the Ardennes forest because Marcus Sullivan built a forbidden device from salvaged German materials and learned to detect thermal patterns in absolute darkness. Klaus Hoffmann lived because Marcus aimed at different targets when the German patrol broke and ran. 217 American soldiers in Baker Company survived December 20th, 1944, because Marcus violated direct orders and engaged an enemy force command couldn't see. An entire German battalion's assault failed because Marcus recognized that 23 men with flamethrowers were the key to a larger breakthrough and eliminated that key before it could unlock disaster. Modern American soldiers operate with night vision capabilities that trace their conceptual origins to brass casings, radium paint, and an ultraviolet lamp assembled in a frozen foxhole. All of these truths exist simultaneously. Marcus Sullivan was a rule-breaker who saved lives. He was a killer who remembered every death. He was an innovator who spent 50 years trying to build instead of destroy. He was a soldier who understood that sometimes the right thing and the regulation thing aren't the same. He was a human being who carried the weight of 73 deaths and never stopped feeling that weight. The Sullivan Innovation Center stands as testament not just to what he created, but to what he understood, that innovation without conscience is dangerous, that killing, even necessary killing, comes with cost, that rules exist for good reasons, but sometimes must be broken for better reasons, and that the measure of a man isn't just in what he accomplishes, but in how he lives with the consequences of his accomplishments. Marcus Sullivan accomplished something extraordinary in December 1944. He lived with those consequences for 49 years. Both the accomplishment and the consequences deserve to be remembered, because some histories are too important to simplify into heroes and villains. Some histories require us to hold multiple truths at once. Marcus Sullivan was necessary, and he was haunted. He saved lives, and he took lives. He innovated, and he regretted. All true, all important, all part of the story of how one forbidden night vision hack made German patrols vanish from the Ardennes forest and changed warfare forever.